Hello, this is Barefoot Bible. Today's video is part one of Text Without Context as Pretext. Back in John 10:15, Jesus says, "As the Father knoweth me, even so know I the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep." We recently explained that some misinterpret this verse, saying Jesus died for some, but not for all. Context is so vital in Bible interpretation. So let's back up before verse 15 and check the setting. In the previous chapter, a blind man is healed, verse 7, but then he's kicked out of the synagogue by the Pharisees, verse 34. The Pharisees then confront Jesus in verse 40. And moving on then to chapter 10, Jesus answers the Pharisees with a parable about sheep refusing to follow a stranger, verse 1 through 5. Verse 6 indicates they understood not. And then in verse 7 to 18, Jesus explains the parable to the Pharisees. So verse 15 appears in Jesus' answer to the Pharisees' confrontation. Context directs us to look for other verses in the same chapter regarding Jesus laying down his life. Jesus said in verse 9, he's the door of salvation for any man. And in verse 10, he came so that they, pointing back to any man, might have abundant life. Verse 11 said Jesus gives his life for the sheep. And verse 17, the Father loves Jesus because he lays down his life. And verse 18, Jesus lays down his life of himself and has the power to take it again. So context reminds us also to look for other verses surrounding verse 15 about the sheep. So look at that. Jesus is the door of the sheep, verse 7. Verse 8, thieves and robbers came before, but the sheep didn't listen. Verse 11, Jesus is the good shepherd, giving his life for the sheep. And verse 16, there are other sheep in another fold Jesus will bring with him and make one fold and one shepherd. So John 10, verse 15, in its context. First, we'd ask, does the immediate context in John 10 support the interpretation Jesus didn't die for all, but only for some? I think the answer is no. Does this chapter clearly support the doctrine of limited atonement? Jesus' death on the cross only paid for the sins of a select group, the elect. Again, in the context, the answer is no. Do other passages in the book of John support the interpretation Jesus only died for a select group, that his blood, cleansed the sins of some, but not all? And again, the answer is no. Text should not be interpreted without context. Please subscribe, like, leave a comment to help promote our channel. And then next Thursday, we will continue with Text Without Context, and we'll go on with a part 2. God bless.